Have you ever been caught off guard by a harsh comment, a dismissive coworker, or even a stranger's rude remark? That moment when your pulse quickens, your face flushes, and you feel the urge to fire back, or worse, shrink away. We've all been there. Negativity, whether it's a passive-aggressive email or an outright personal attack, has a way of throwing us off balance. But what if you could meet those moments with unshakable calm? What if, instead of reacting impulsively, you could respond with quiet dignity, turning frustration into an opportunity for growth? That's exactly what the ancient Stoics mastered, and it's a skill anyone can learn. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome at the height of its power, faced betrayals, wars, and endless political scheming. Yet his private writings reveal a man who refused to let external chaos dictate his inner peace. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Notice he didn't say you could control what others do or say. He didn't promise a life free from conflict. Instead, he pointed to something far more empowering, the ability to choose how you respond. That's the heart of Stoicism, not suppressing emotions, but mastering them. In this video, we'll explore practical tools borrowed from Stoic philosophy that help you stay grounded when faced with criticism, anger, or pettiness. You'll learn how to reframe negative encounters through the lens of perception, creating space between what happens and how you interpret it. We'll talk about emotional detachment, not as cold indifference, but as a way to protect your peace without shutting people out. And most importantly, you'll discover how to cultivate resilience so that other people's negativity no longer derails your confidence or your day. This isn't about winning arguments or changing others. It's about reclaiming your power, one thoughtful response at a time. So if you're ready to transform the way you handle life's inevitable friction, let's begin. Epictetus, one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, put it simply, men are disturbed not by things but by their opinions about things. Think about that for a moment. A rude comment, a condescending look, even outright hostility. None of these things have any power over you until you decide what they mean. The Stoics saw negativity as nothing more than an external event, like rain or wind. It's not the rain that ruins your day, it's your refusal to carry an umbrella. Take a modern example. Imagine you're at work and a coworker snaps at you in front of others. Your first instinct might be to take it personally, to assume they're targeting you, disrespecting you, or trying to undermine you. But what if you paused and asked yourself, is this about me or is it about them? Maybe they're stressed, sleep-deprived, or struggling with something entirely unrelated to you. The Stoics would argue that the comment itself is neutral. The pain comes from the story you attach to it. This is where Stoicism turns negativity into an opportunity. Every harsh word, every unfair criticism becomes a chance to practice virtue. Can you respond with patience instead of anger? Can you choose understanding over defensiveness? The ancient Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing before labeling something as good or bad. When someone throws negativity your way, that pause is your superpower. It's the space where you reclaim control. So here's a challenge. Think back to a recent moment when someone's words or actions upset you. Now ask yourself, did the situation hurt me or did my interpretation of it hurt me? That shift in perspective doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it does free you from being at its mercy. Because here's the truth, negativity only wins if you let it define your inner world, and that's a choice no one can make for you. Stoicism begins with one question: what is truly yours to command? Epictetus framed it this way: some things are within our power while others are not. It sounds simple, but this distinction, the dichotomy of control, is the bedrock of emotional resilience. Picture a ship caught in a storm. The sailor can't control the wind or waves, but they can adjust the sails, steady the rudder, and choose how to navigate. That's the Stoic mindset in action. Let's break it down. You can't control traffic, delays, or that person who cuts you off in line. You can't force others to be kind, fair, or reasonable. But here's what you can control: your attention, your effort, and most importantly, your interpretation. When someone snaps at you, their words are out of your hands, but whether you internalize them, dismiss them, or learn from them, that's entirely up to you. Take a moment to test this. Think of a recent frustration, maybe a project setback or a tense conversation. Now, grab a pen and divide it into two columns: what was outside your influence and where you had agency. For example, a coworker's sarcastic remark goes in the uncontrollable column. Your decision to shrug it off or address it calmly, that lands squarely in the controllable side. This exercise isn't about dismissing problems, it's about redirecting energy where it matters. The Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore the uncontrollable. They urged us to recognize it, to stop wasting effort on battles we can't win. Imagine spending hours agonizing over a flight delay. The plane won't take off faster because you're angry. But you can use that time to read, rest, or rethink your schedule. That shift from resistance to adaptation is where freedom lies. Here's your practical takeaway. The next time negativity strikes, pause and ask, is this mine to fix? If the answer's no, release it like a balloon. If it's yes, act with clarity, not emotion. This isn't passivity, it's precision. And that's how you turn chaos into calm, one deliberate choice at a time. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, barely moving, when someone suddenly swerves into your lane without signaling. Your grip tightens on the wheel, your heart races, maybe you even feel the urge to honk or yell. That surge of anger is automatic, but here's the key: it's not inevitable. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote that the space between what happens and how we react is where our power lies. He called it the mental gap, and mastering it is the essence of emotional detachment. Detachment isn't about shutting down or pretending you don't feel anything. It's about becoming the observer of your emotions instead of being swept away by them. Think of it like watching clouds pass overhead. You notice them, their shape, their movement, but you don't chase them or try to control them. Emotions work the same way. Anger, frustration, even hurt, they rise and fall. The problem isn't the emotion itself, it's when we let it hijack our actions. Consider that traffic scenario again. The driver who cut you off didn't ruin your day, your reaction to them could. Every time you dwell on it, replay it, or let it fuel resentment, you're handing them control over your peace. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca warned that unchecked reactions are like pouring fuel on a fire, but when you pause, even for just a few breaths, you create room to choose. Maybe you shrug it off, maybe you use the delay to listen to a podcast you love. The point isn't what you do, it's that you decide rather than react. Here's a simple practice to build this skill. The next time you feel a strong emotion, try the 5-breath rule. Breathe in slowly for 5 seconds, hold for 5, exhale for 5. As you do, name the emotion silently. This is anger. This is annoyance. That tiny act of labeling creates distance, turning a wave of feeling into something you can witness rather than drown in. Now let's make this personal. This week, pick one emotion you often get tangled in, maybe impatience in long lines or defensiveness during criticism. Your challenge: observe it like a scientist studying a curious phenomenon. Notice where it shows up in your body: a clenched jaw, a racing pulse. Watch the stories your mind spins about why you should feel this way. But don't judge, don't act, just see it. This isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about reclaiming the freedom to respond, not just react. Because when you master detachment, you'll find something surprising. The very things that once threw you off balance become chances to practice strength. And that's a skill no one can take from you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way." 4 words that hold the key to transforming negativity into fuel. The Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they saw it as raw material for growth. Imagine criticism not as an attack, but as free coaching. Picture envy not as a threat, but as proof you're doing something worth noticing. Every slight, every challenge becomes a whetstone to sharpen your character. That's the power of perception. It turns stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Take Socrates, who faced relentless mockery for questioning Athenian norms. While others seethed at the insults, he remained amused, telling his students, "If a donkey kicked me, would I take it personally?" He didn't just tolerate ridicule, he used it to clarify his principles. When the jury sentenced him to death, he drank the hemlock calmly, proving his philosophy wasn't just theory, it was lived truth. The same words meant to shame him became immortal lessons in integrity. Now bring this into your life. Think of a time someone belittled your ambitions. What if, instead of resentment, you saw their doubt as motivation? Maybe that coworker who rolls their eyes at your ideas secretly fears your potential. Perhaps the relative who calls your goals unrealistic is projecting their own unmet dreams. The Stoics would ask, does their opinion change what's true? If you're honest in your efforts, no amount of outside noise can diminish that. Here's a practical reframe. Next time you face criticism, ask 3 questions. Is there truth here I can use? Is this about them or me? How could this make me stronger? Even baseless negativity has value. It trains you to trust yourself when others don't. Think of a gardener pruning a tree. The cuts seem harsh, but they direct growth. Your critics, knowingly or not, might be pruning distractions from your path. Let's try an experiment. Recall a past insult that stung. Now rewrite the story. Maybe that harsh teacher's feedback pushed you to master a skill. Maybe an ex's rejection led you to someone better suited. The event hasn't changed, but its meaning has. That's Stoic alchemy, turning leaden moments into gold. Because when you stop seeing negativity as something to defeat and start seeing it as something to use, you unlock a profound truth: the world doesn't shape you. Your interpretations do. So the next time life hands you a setback, hear Marcus Aurelius whispering, "This is the way, not around it, not despite it, through it." Because the obstacle isn't blocking your path, it is the path. There's a quiet strength in not taking the bait. Non-reactivity isn't passivity. It's the art of choosing your battles with precision. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming a renowned philosopher, put it starkly: silence is a lesson learned from many sufferings. He wasn't advocating suppression. He was describing the wisdom of pausing when every fiber of your being wants to strike back. Think of it like this: when someone throws a punch, dodging doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart enough not to engage on their terms. Consider 2 people in a heated debate. One interrupts, raises their voice, and twists words to win. The other listens, lets the anger hang in the air, and responds with a single measured sentence. Who controls the room? Reactive people are like fireworks, loud, bright, and quickly spent. Thoughtful responders are like deep water, calm on the surface, impossible to rattle, and far more powerful in the long run. Here's a tool to cultivate that depth: the 10-second rule. Before responding to provocation, count silently to 10. Not in your head, out loud if you can. Those seconds are a buffer between emotion and action. In that space, ask yourself, will this response improve the situation or just my ego? 10 seconds might seem trivial, but it's often enough to shift from reflex to choice. Take a cue from actor Keanu Reeves, who faced years of tabloid ridicule and personal tragedy. When a talk show host once mocked him, the audience laughed uncomfortably. Reeves didn't flinch or fire back. He simply said, "Wow," with a small smile, then steered the conversation elsewhere. His silence wasn't defeat, it was a masterclass in dignity. The moment went viral, not for the insult, but for the grace that rendered it powerless. Now, reflect on your own life. Can you recall a time when biting your tongue diffused a situation? Maybe a family argument that fizzled because you refused to escalate, or a coworker's jab that lost its sting when met with silence. Those moments reveal a profound truth. Negativity often feeds on reaction. Starve it of oxygen and it suffocates on its own. This isn't about swallowing your voice or avoiding conflict. It's about recognizing that your most potent response isn't always verbal. Sometimes the loudest statement is the one you don't make. And when you master that pause, when you let silence do the heavy lifting, you'll find something unexpected. The people who once knew exactly how to push your buttons suddenly have no idea where you keep them. Seneca once observed, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." That simple truth holds profound power when facing negativity. The Stoics didn't just preach indifference to insults, they practiced understanding. Behind every harsh word, every act of pettiness, there's often unspoken pain. Recognizing this transforms conflict into connection. Imagine someone shouting at a waiter over a mistaken order. The easy reaction is judgment. How rude. But the Stoic response asks a deeper question. What wound is this behavior bandaging? Take customer service as an example. A furious caller berates you for a company error you didn't make. Your instinct might be defensiveness or frustration. Now shift perspective. That anger could stem from financial stress, a terrible day, or feeling powerless in other areas of life. Responding with, "I hear how upsetting this is, let's fix it together," doesn't just diffuse the situation, it addresses the real need beneath the outburst. This isn't about excusing poor behavior. It's about refusing to let someone else's storm become your weather. Empathy, in the Stoic sense, is strategic. Seneca wrote that kindness softens the hearts even of the wild beasts. When you meet hostility with calm understanding, you remove the fuel from the fire. Think of a parent calming a tantrum-throwing child. They don't shout back, they kneel to eye level and ask what's wrong. Adults are no different, we just throw more sophisticated tantrums. The coworker who snaps may be drowning in deadlines. The friend who cancels plans last minute might be battling anxiety they won't name. Here's how to practice this. Next time someone's negativity catches you off guard, pause and silently ask, what unseen battle are they fighting? That momentary reflection creates space for compassion. You might even respond with something as simple as, "That sounds frustrating," acknowledging their emotion without absorbing it. This approach doesn't just reduce conflict, it often reveals the humanity beneath the hostility. History offers a powerful example. When Roman soldiers dragged a defiant prisoner before Marcus Aurelius, expecting harsh punishment, the emperor instead asked about the man's grievances. The prisoner, disarmed by this unexpected empathy, abandoned his defiance. Marcus later wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." In other words, don't mirror their anger, transcend it. Try this reframe today. When faced with rudeness, imagine holding up two mental flashcards. The first reads, "This is about me." The second, "This is about them." Most of the time, you'll find the second card holds the truth, and that shift from taking things personally to seeing them as projections of others' struggles doesn't just protect your peace. It gives you the quiet power to respond in a way that might just heal instead of escalate, because sometimes the kindest act of strength is understanding what someone's anger can't say aloud. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Think about that for a moment. Every harsh word, every setback, every moment of friction, these aren't just obstacles. They're the weights in life's gym, the resistance that builds emotional muscle. Resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something you forge one challenge at a time. Consider Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years under brutal conditions. He could have emerged bitter, broken. Instead, he famously said, "Prison was my university." He studied his captor's language, mentored fellow inmates, and honed the patience that would later dismantle apartheid without civil war. Mandela didn't just endure adversity, he let it sculpt him into a leader whose compassion shook the world. The same walls meant to crush him became the anvil where his strength was hammered into shape. Here's the Stoic secret: resilience works like a muscle. Avoid discomfort and it atrophies. Face it head on and it grows. Every time you choose calm over rage, perspective over self-pity, you're doing the psychological equivalent of lifting weights. Take public speaking, a fear that makes many sweat. The first time you step on stage, your hands might shake, but with each speech, the terror lessens. The nervous system learns this isn't life-threatening, it's growth-giving. Negativity operates the same way. The first time a colleague undermines you, it stings. The 10th time, you've built calluses not of numbness but of wisdom. Try this exercise tonight. Open a journal and write about 3 past challenges you've overcome. Not just what happened, but how it changed you. Maybe a rejection led you to a better opportunity. Maybe a failure taught you humility. The Stoics called this turning obstacles upside down, finding the gift in the grit. When you chronicle these moments, you're not just reminiscing, you're rewiring your brain to see current struggles as future strength. Now ask yourself, what did my past hardships teach me that easy times never could? Maybe patience, maybe discernment, maybe the quiet certainty that you can survive more than you think. That's the alchemy of resilience. It takes the lead of suffering and turns it into gold. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Calm isn't the absence of storms. It's the ability to stand in the wind and whisper, "I've weathered worse." So the next time life throws a punch, remember, you're not just enduring. You're training, and every blow that doesn't break you is secretly making you stronger. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with rocks labeled pointless arguments, online trolls, and petty office gossip. Every time you engage with these, you're adding another stone to your load. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly in his Meditations: you always own the option of having no opinion. There is no need to strain your soul over things you can't control. That's not indifference, it's strategic energy conservation. The Stoics understood attention as a finite resource, like money in a bank account. Spend it recklessly on nonsense, and you'll have nothing left for what truly matters. Take social media as a modern battleground. A stranger leaves a cruel comment on your post. Your fingers itch to respond, to set the record straight. But here's the reality: that person likely won't change their mind, and your rebuttal will only drain you. The Stoic move: scroll past without internalizing. Picture their words as a pebble thrown into your path. You wouldn't stop your journey to argue with a rock. Why do it with words? Every minute spent wrestling with trolls is a minute stolen from meaningful connections or personal growth. This principle extends offline too. That coworker who constantly complains, the relative who thrives on drama, Their negativity is like second-hand smoke. You don't have to inhale. Marcus Aurelius advised, "If someone can prove me wrong, I'll gladly change." What I seek is truth, not victory. Apply this filter. Does engaging serve truth or growth? If not, step back. Here's a practical challenge. Today, identify one source of negativity you habitually engage with, maybe a toxic subreddit, a gossipy group chat, or even a pessimistic friend. Hit mute, unfollow, or redirect the conversation. Notice how much mental space this frees. Energy economics isn't about avoiding all conflict. It's about investing wisely. Because when you stop feeding the distractions, you'll find something remarkable. The strength you once wasted on nonsense becomes fuel for your highest priorities. Think of your attention as floodlights in a vast landscape. Right now, they might be illuminating every pothole and piece of litter. What if you redirected that light to the path ahead? The garbage doesn't disappear, it just stops dominating your view. That shift, more than any external change, is where real freedom begins, because the art of selective attention isn't about what you're ignoring. It's about what you're finally able to see. There's an underestimated weapon in the Stoic toolkit, one that disarms hostility without a single defensive move: humor. Seneca, who advised emperors and endured exile, wrote that laughter is a powerful remedy for difficult situations, not the biting sarcasm that leaves scars, but the kind of lightness that lifts tension like sunlight burning off fog. Picture this: someone throws a barb your way, expecting you to flinch or fire back. Instead, you respond with a playful twist, turning their intended sting into a shared moment of levity. Suddenly, the dynamic shifts. The insult loses its power because you refuse to treat it as one. Take Winston Churchill, who faced relentless political attacks. When a critic sneered, "If I were your husband, I'd poison your coffee," Churchill didn't bristle. He quipped, "If I were your wife, I'd drink it." The crowd laughed, the insult fizzled, and the critic was left with nothing to swing at. That's the genius of wit. It deflects malice by refusing to take it seriously. The Stoics didn't see humor as trivial. They saw it as a form of control. When you laugh with a situation instead of seething at it, you're no longer a victim of circumstance. You're the one framing the narrative. But there's a crucial distinction here. Sarcasm often masks pain, its humor with hidden thorns. True Stoic levity, though, comes from a place of unshaken calm. Think of it like Aikido, the martial art that redirects an opponent's energy instead of opposing it head-on. A coworker snaps, "Nice of you to finally join the meeting." Instead of snapping back or stewing silently, you might smile and say, "I wanted to build suspense like a season finale." The tension dissolves because you've chosen not to mirror their negativity. Here's how to practice this. Start small. Next time someone makes a minor dig, a backhanded compliment, or passive-aggressive remark, experiment with a light-hearted response. The barista grimaces and says, "Another coffee, you're keeping us in business." Instead of stiffening, try, "Glad to support your caffeine empire." It's not about being clever. It's about refusing to let pettiness land. Over time, these playful deflections become second nature, like emotional immunity. Consider how Marcus Aurelius handled relentless conspiracies against him. He wrote, "The best revenge is to not be like your enemy." Humor, in this sense, isn't just a shield, it's a mirror. When you respond to pettiness with grace and a grin, you reveal the absurdity of the attack without degrading yourself. So ask yourself, what's one recent conflict where a dash of humor could have changed the tone? Not to dismiss real issues, but to remind everyone, including yourself, that most negativity isn't worth the weight we give it. Because sometimes the most stoic response isn't solemnity, it's a well-timed smile. Epictetus had a radical way of framing self-respect. tolerate others without tolerating their nonsense. That razor-sharp distinction captures the Stoic approach to boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as fences to protect your inner peace. Imagine your mind as a garden. You wouldn't let anyone trample your flowers, but you also wouldn't attack someone for accidentally stepping on a weed. Stoicism teaches that healthy boundaries aren't about controlling others, they're about tending your own soil with care. Consider the difference between patience and passivity. A Stoic endures life's inevitable annoyances, a slow-moving line, a forgetful neighbor with quiet equanimity. But when someone repeatedly disrespects your time, values, or dignity, that's not patience, that's self-betrayal. The ancient philosophers knew this well. When a wealthy Roman once mocked Epictetus for his humble lifestyle, the former slave didn't bow his head. He replied, "If you wanted a fool's opinion, you've come to the right place." Witty, yes, but more importantly, it was a boundary dressed in wisdom. He signaled that mockery wouldn't be met with approval, but he did it without matching the insult's energy. Now let's translate this to modern work life. Suppose a colleague constantly dumps last-minute tasks on you, framing it as teamwork. A Stoic response isn't seething silently or exploding in frustration. It's saying calmly but firmly, "I want to support our goals, but I need advance notice to do quality work. Let's set expectations moving forward. Notice what's happening here. You're not accusing or apologizing. You're stating a fact about your capacity while leaving room for collaboration." That's the essence of virtuous boundaries, clear enough to protect your peace, flexible enough to allow for growth. Scripts like these help anchor boundaries in respect rather than resentment. To a chronic interrupter, "I want to hear your thoughts. Let me finish this point first." To an overly critical friend, "I value your perspective, but I need encouragement along with feedback." To a family member who oversteps, "I know you mean well, but this is my decision to make." The key lies in that small but mighty word, and not but as a weapon, but and as a bridge. I respect you and I respect myself too. That's the Stoic balance, holding space for others without abandoning yourself. Here's where it gets personal. Think of one relationship where you've tolerated more than you should. Now ask, what would change if I saw boundaries not as confrontation, but as the highest form of respect for both of us? Because here's the paradox: true patience isn't limitless. It knows when to say, "This far, no further," not with anger, but with the quiet certainty of someone who values their own soul. And that's a line no one can cross unless you let them. Seneca once wrote, "Delay is the antidote to anger," 4 words that hold the key to dismantling reactivity. In that sliver of time between provocation and response, what the Stoics called the mental gap, lies your greatest power. Think of it like this: when you're handed a cup of boiling water, your first instinct is to drop it. But what if you could hold it just long enough to find a tray? That's the Stoic pause, not suppressing emotion, but creating space to choose your next move wisely. Here's how to put it into practice: the 3-breath rule. Before responding to anything charged, a snide remark, an unfair accusation, take 3 intentional breaths. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. That 15-second window works like a mental reset button. Neuroscientists have found this simple act activates the prefrontal cortex, the brain's reasoning center, while dialing down the amygdala's fight or flight reactions. You're not just calming the body, you're shifting the entire neurological playing field. Picture a seasoned trial lawyer in a high-stakes courtroom. The opposing counsel throws a cheap shot, hoping to provoke an emotional outburst that could sway the jury. But the attorney doesn't bite. Instead, they pause, maybe even take a deliberate sip of water, letting the tension hang in the air before responding with measured precision. That silence isn't weakness, it's strategic restraint. The Stoics would call it owning the moment. Every second you wait strips negativity of its momentum, like a wave losing force as it reaches the shore. To make this habitual, try anchoring the practice to something tangible. Set your phone wallpaper to a single word, pause. Every time you glance at it, you're training your brain to associate triggers with that vital gap. Or borrow a trick from ancient Roman orators. Carry a smooth stone in your pocket. When friction arises, let your fingers find it as a tactile reminder, not yet, respond when ready. Now here's your challenge. Today, choose one conversation, whether with a coworker, family member, or even a stranger, and commit to the 3-breath rule. Notice what changes. Does the other person fill the silence? Does your response feel less reactive and more deliberate? That space between stimulus and reaction is where your agency lies. And with each practiced pause, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're rewriting your instincts, because in the end, the goal isn't to never feel provoked. It's to never let that provocation dictate who you are. Marcus Aurelius never intended his personal writings to become one of history's most revered philosophical works. He called them simply notes to himself, a private practice of untangling life's knots through ink and parchment. Those notebooks, now known as meditations, reveal something profound. Journaling wasn't just his habit, it was his daily Stoic gym. Every entry was a set of mental reps, strengthening his ability to separate facts from feelings, events from interpretations. And here's the good news: you don't need imperial problems to benefit from imperial wisdom. The same tool that steadied a Roman emperor can steady you. Let's break down why this works. When negativity strikes, our minds spin stories. They did this because they disrespect me. This ruined everything. Journaling forces those stories onto the page where they lose their emotional charge. Think of it like taking a screenshot of your thoughts. Suddenly, you're not drowning in the experience, you're analyzing it from the shore. Epictetus taught that it's not what happens, but what you tell yourself about what happens that causes pain. Journaling shines a light on those subconscious narratives, exposing the gaps between reality and reaction. Here's how to practice Stoic journaling in 3 steps. First, describe the event with detached precision, as if you're a journalist reporting facts. At 3 p.m., my boss criticized my report in front of the team. No adverbs, no assumptions, just the bones of what occurred. Next, examine your role with radical honesty. I felt humiliated and defensive. I didn't ask clarifying questions. Finally, script a wiser response for next time. I could request private feedback first, or see this as a chance to improve my presentation skills. This isn't about self-blame. It's about reclaiming agency where it actually exists. For a modern twist, try the Stoic debrief template. Divide your page into 3 columns. Today's challenge, the external event. My reaction, your emotional and behavioral response. And better response, how virtue, wisdom, courage, justice might guide you next time. When a coworker's passive-aggressive email rattled you, the first column holds their words. The second reveals your clenched jaw and hasty reply. The third. Maybe respond tomorrow after reflection, or ask if they'd like to discuss concerns over coffee. The magic happens in that third column. It's where you train your future self. Now let's make this personal. Tonight, carve out 5 minutes. Think of one recent friction point, a misunderstanding, a frustration, even a small regret. Write it down using the 3-column method. Then ask, if this happened to my best friend, what advice would I give them? That slight shift from participant to observer is where clarity lies. Because journaling, in the Stoic sense, isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about preparing for the future with eyes wide open, and that's a practice no one can take from you. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who endured exile and persecution, called anger the most destructive of emotions, not because it's inherently wrong, but because it's energy squandered. Picture a pot of water boiling over, scalding the stove instead of cooking the meal. That's uncontrolled anger, heat with no direction. But here's the Stoic twist: that same fire, when channeled, can forge steel. The difference lies not in the emotion itself, but in what you do with it. Consider two people stuck in traffic. One honks, curses, and white-knuckles the wheel, arriving at work exhausted. The other uses the delay to brainstorm solutions for a project, scribbling notes on their phone. Both felt frustration. Only one transformed it into forward motion. Stoicism doesn't ask you to eliminate anger, it teaches you to harness it like a river diverted to turn a mill wheel. Every surge of irritation carries kinetic energy. The question is, will you let it flood your peace or use it to power something meaningful? History offers a masterclass in this redirection when Martin Luther King Jr. faced violent opposition during the civil rights movement. He didn't suppress his righteous anger, he disciplined it. Protest marches weren't explosions of rage, they were meticulously planned acts of courage, turning outrage into songs, speeches, and strategic boycotts. The fire that could have consumed him instead illuminated a path for millions. That's the alchemy of Stoic action, taking what others intend as poison and transmuting it into medicine. Now bring this into your daily life. The next time a rude comment lands like a slap, pause and ask, what could this feeling fuel if I redirected it? Maybe the gym becomes your protest march, every set a silent rebuttal to doubters. Maybe a snub from a colleague sparks a new certification pursuit, proving your worth through growth rather than arguments. Even something as simple as channeling annoyance into cleaning your workspace can shift the energy from destructive to constructive. Here's the key distinction: yelling at someone who cut you off in traffic changes nothing. Using that adrenaline to finally sign up for the defensive driving course you've been putting off, that changes you. Anger is nature's alarm system, a signal that something needs attention. The Stoics weren't advocating ignoring the alarm, they were teaching us to respond to it wisely. So the next time your temper flares, hear it as a challenge. This energy is too valuable to waste. Where could it take me if I put it to work? Because transformed anger isn't just managed, it's magnified into momentum. And that's how you turn sparks into torchlight. Epictetus offered a paradoxical truth. He is a wise man who does not grieve for what he has not. At first glance, it sounds like resignation, but look closer. What he's describing is gratitude in its purest form, not as passive acceptance, but as active armor against resentment. Picture two people receiving the same criticism. One fixates on the sting, replaying the words on loop. The other acknowledges the feedback, then mentally scans their life for three things the critique didn't touch: their health, a loving relationship, a project they're proud of. The criticism hasn't changed. The emotional aftermath couldn't be more different. Science backs this Stoic insight. Studies at UC Davis found that participants who kept weekly gratitude lists showed 23% lower cortisol levels, the stress hormone, than control groups. Their brains literally processed adversity differently. When negativity strikes, gratitude acts like a neurological filter, catching the poison before it seeps into your system. Marcus Aurelius modeled this during military campaigns, writing at night not about battlefield horrors, but about the kindness of his teachers, the loyalty of friends, even the simple gift of breath in his lungs. He wasn't ignoring reality, he was balancing its scales. Here's how to apply this today. Next time criticism lands, pause and name three parts of your life it doesn't diminish. Maybe your dog still greets you with unconditional joy. Maybe your favorite song still gives you chills. These aren't distractions, they're reminders that no single negative event defines your whole story. For a modern twist, try this challenge. Text someone you're grateful for today. Not a generic thanks, but a specific observation. Your patience yesterday when I was stressed meant more than you know. Gratitude, when directed outward, becomes kryptonite to bitterness. It's hard to stew in resentment when you're actively reminding someone they matter. Consider the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold lacquer. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted as part of the object's history. Gratitude works the same way. It doesn't erase life's fractures, it transforms them into evidence of resilience. So when negativity tries to convince you everything is broken, gratitude whispers, look closer. See what remains intact, and sometimes that's enough to keep you whole. Seneca observed something fascinating about human nature. A crowd imitates the emotions it sees. Like a stone dropped in water, your calm doesn't just stay contained. It ripples outward, changing the emotional atmosphere around you. Think of the last time you entered a room where someone was radiating quiet confidence. Didn't it make you stand a little straighter, breathe a little deeper? That's the hidden power of composure. It's not just self-protection, it's social alchemy. History gives us masterclasses in this phenomenon. Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, who famously landed U.S. Airways Flight 154 on the Hudson River, didn't shout orders or panic when both engines failed. His first words to air traffic control, "My aircraft," 2 words delivered with such steady authority that his crew later reported feeling not terror but absolute focus. In that moment, his calm became their calm. The Stoics would call this prosoph, the practice of vigilant awareness that allows you to anchor others when storms hit. Now consider how this plays out in everyday life. A parent soothing a toddler's tantrum by kneeling to eye level and speaking softly. A teacher quieting a rowdy classroom not by yelling, but by standing silently until curiosity overcomes chaos. These aren't just techniques, they're demonstrations of emotional physics. Energy matches energy, fire fuels fire, but stillness creates gravity. Here's a practical experiment. Next time you're in a tense group situation, maybe a heated family discussion or a stressful work meeting, try lowering your voice instead of raising it. Slow your gestures, breathe deeply enough that others might notice. Watch what happens. Often, the room's temperature drops by degrees. This isn't manipulation, it's leadership of the most stoic kind. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When you choose calm, you offer others permission to do the same. Think of someone in your life who embodies this unshakable presence. Perhaps a grandparent who met life's disappointments with quiet humor, or a colleague who diffuses office drama with a well-timed question. What specific qualities make their composure so compelling? The way they listen fully before responding, their refusal to engage in gossip. These aren't personality traits, they're practiced arts. Now imagine yourself as that model for someone else. Not perfect, not emotionless, but rooted, because here's the secret the Stoics knew. Calm isn't something you find. It's something you build, one deliberate breath at a time. And when you do, you're not just protecting your peace, you're becoming the eye of the storm for everyone around you. Marcus Aurelius had a blunt reminder for himself in his private writings. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Not exactly a pep talk, but that's the point. He wasn't being cynical, he was being realistic. The Stoics understood something profound. Expecting people to be perfect is like expecting the sky never to rain. Disappointment doesn't come from others' flaws, it comes from our refusal to anticipate them. Think of a playground sandbox. Kids throw sand, not because they're malicious, but because that's what kids do in sandboxes. The solution isn't to scold the sand or wish the kids were different. It's to either accept the occasional grain in your eyes or choose a different place to sit. Human relationships work the same way. That coworker who always interrupts, the neighbor who never returns borrowed tools, their behavior isn't personal, it's just their version of sand throwing. The Stoic question isn't why are they like this, it's why am I still surprised? Here's where tactical expectations come in. Lowering them doesn't mean settling for poor treatment. It means entering interactions with clear-eyed awareness. If you loan your brother money knowing he's bad with repayment, you've either made peace with the risk or you've set a boundary, no loan, just gifts. Either way, you've removed the sting of disappointment because you've aligned expectation with reality. Epictetus put it sharply, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. When you stop demanding others change to suit your preferences, you reclaim your peace without their cooperation. Consider the restaurant server who mixes up your order. You could fume about incompetence, or you could recognize they're juggling 10 tables during a rush. One reaction leaves you simmering through dinner, the other lets you shrug and request a correction. Same situation, different framing. This isn't about excusing poor service, it's about refusing to let someone else's busy night ruin your meal. Now try this reframe. Make a list of 3 people who consistently frustrate you. Next to each name, write what's their sand. The blunt friend who lacks tact, that's their sand. It comes with their directness. The flaky cousin who cancels plans, that's theirs. The key isn't to tolerate harm, but to stop expecting a leopard to change its spots. Either bring an umbrella or don't stand in the rain. There's a liberating irony here. When you stop demanding perfection from others, you often find they irritate you less. Like noticing a toddler's sand throwing isn't a personal attack. You start to see adult flaws as inevitable as weather patterns. And just as you wouldn't yell at a cloud for raining, you'll find it easier to sigh, step aside, and stay dry. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, offered a deceptively simple piece of wisdom. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak. This wasn't just advice about politeness, it was a tactical approach to human interaction. Strategic silence isn't about withholding words. It's about creating space for understanding, disarming conflict, and conserving energy for what truly matters. Imagine a chess player who impulsively moves pieces without considering the board. Now picture a grandmaster who sits perfectly still, studying every angle before making a single, decisive play. That's the difference between reactive speech and intentional silence. One is checkers knee-jerk and linear. The other is chess calculated and multidimensional. History's most effective communicators understood this power. When Mahatma Gandhi faced British colonial judges accusing him of sedition, he didn't launch into a fiery defense. He listened utterly calm, utterly present before responding with a single sentence that exposed the absurdity of the charges. His silence beforehand wasn't weakness. It was the quiet of a storm gathering force. The Stoics saw silence similarly, not as emptiness but as a vessel waiting to be filled with meaning. Epictetus advised, if someone speaks badly of you, don't argue. Say instead, he doesn't know my other faults, or he would have mentioned those too. That's the art of deflecting negativity without engaging it. Like stepping aside from a swinging fist and letting the attacker's own momentum throw them off balance. Here's how to practice this today. For 1 day, experiment with minimal reactive speech. When someone criticizes you, pause for 5 full seconds before responding, if you respond at all. Notice how often people fill that silence with backtracking, clarification, or even apologies. Watch how disputes lose steam when you refuse to fuel them. This isn't about stonewalling, it's about redirecting conversations from emotion to intention. Like a judo master using an opponent's force against them, strategic silence turns volatile exchanges into opportunities for clarity. Think back to a moment when silence served you well. Maybe it was the time you didn't rise to a provocation, and the other person's argument unraveled without your interference. Or when you listened fully to a friend's rant, and your quiet presence helped them find their own solution. The Stoics recognized that most words add heat, not light. By choosing silence, you're not surrendering the conversation, you're elevating it, because sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you don't make. Cato the Younger stood before the Roman Senate, his political enemies sneering as they prepared to exile him. Instead of lashing out, he turned their insults into a lesson in dignity. "If you think me dangerous now," he said calmly, "imagine how formidable I'll become in exile with nothing left to lose." This wasn't bravado, it was the embodiment of Stoic principle, treating adversaries not with hatred but with unbroken self-respect. While others schemed for revenge, Cato famously refused to even speak ill of his rivals, believing that true strength lay in moral consistency, not momentary victories. His legacy wasn't built on crushing opponents, but on proving that character remains intact even when power is stripped away. Fast forward to modern courtrooms, where judges like Ruth Bader Ginsburg faced relentless criticism without ever compromising judicial decorum. When a journalist once asked how she responded to being called a disgrace, she simply smiled and said, "Reacting in anger would be the real disgrace." Like Cato, she understood that impartiality isn't indifference, it's the disciplined choice to rise above pettiness. Whether in ancient Rome or contemporary benches, Stoic role models share a common thread. They measure success not by silencing detractors, but by refusing to let detractors dictate their conduct. Now consider a lesser-known but equally powerful example. James Stockdale, the U.S. Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam. For 7 years as a POW, he endured torture without yielding military secrets or his humanity. His survival strategy, daily Stoic reflections. He'd ask himself, what would Epictetus do? Imagining the enslaved philosopher's advice on enduring hardship with purpose. Stockdale didn't just survive captivity, he transformed it into a masterclass in resilience, proving that Stoicism isn't theoretical when the stakes are life and death. Your turn to harness this wisdom. Pick one Stoic figure, perhaps Nelson Mandela drawing on Marcus Aurelius during imprisonment, or the entrepreneur who used Seneca's letters to navigate bankruptcy. Research how they applied philosophy in crisis. Then, next time you face frustration, pause and ask, how would their name handle this, not to mimic blindly, but to borrow their lens of perspective? Because history's greatest Stoics weren't statues, they were flesh and blood people who chose again and again to meet chaos with clarity, and that's a choice that remains yours to make today. Epictetus dropped a counterintuitive truth 2,000 years ago that still stings today. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless. Sit with that for a moment. The Stoics understood something modern social media makes us forget. Growth requires tolerating temporary incompetence, awkward phases, and the discomfort of not being universally admired. Picture a toddler learning to walk. They stumble, they wobble, they face plant, and no one judges them for it. Why? Because we all understand that mastery requires looking foolish first. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we lose that permission. We start believing we must be polished, poised, and approved of at all times. But here's the paradox: the more you cling to social approval, the less room you leave for authentic growth. Consider the artist who submitted paintings to galleries for years, collecting rejection letters like grocery receipts. Early critiques called their work derivative and unoriginal. Instead of reshaping their style to please critics, they doubled down on their unique vision. Fast forward a decade, and those same galleries now compete to host their exhibitions. What changed? Not the artist's work, the world's readiness to see it. The Stoics would call those early critics prosopon, the Greek word for mask or role. They weren't arbiters of truth, they were background noise playing their assigned parts in someone else's story. This is where a simple mantra helps. This is not for everyone. Say it when your unconventional idea gets sidelined at a meeting. Whisper it when your parenting style draws unsolicited advice. Brand it onto your creative soul when rejection arrives. Universal appeal is a myth. Even sunlight casts shadows. The moment you accept that some people won't resonate with you, you free yourself to fully resonate with those who will. Now try this exercise. Grab paper and divide it into 2 columns. On the left, list people whose opinions currently shape your choices, maybe a boss, a parent, or social media followers. On the right, note what each gains or loses based on your actions. You'll likely find a startling truth. Many hold influence simply because you've handed them the reins, not because they have any real stake in your well-being. The neighbor who scoffs at your minimalist lifestyle, their disapproval costs them nothing. The internet troll mocking your passion project, they'll forget you by tomorrow. Yet we often prioritize these fleeting opinions over our own inner compass. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Criticism is data, not destiny. When feedback comes, ask not, are they right, but is this useful? Some critiques are like GPS corrections. They help you recalibrate your route. Others are just static on the radio, best tuned out. The art lies in discerning which is which without letting either derail your journey. Because in the end, living for applause is like building a house on sand. The moment the clapping stops, you're left without foundation. But when you build on the bedrock of your own values, that's a structure no amount of disapproval can shake. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about life's fleeting nature in his private journals, urging himself to confront a simple but jarring question: is this worth dying angry over? Picture yourself on your last day, looking back at this moment, the rude comment, the unfair criticism, the petty argument. Would it even register? The Stoics called this practice Memento Mori, remembering death not to morbid, but to clarify what truly deserves your energy. It's like holding a grain of sand up to the sun. What seemed massive suddenly reveals its true scale. Think back to a stressor that consumed you 5 years ago. Maybe a missed promotion, a friendship fallout, or a public embarrassment. Can you even recall the details without straining? Chances are, what felt like a catastrophe then is now just a footnote in your story. Our brains are wired to amplify present pain, but time has a way of shrinking yesterday's monsters into today's anecdotes. The co-worker who undermined you last month. In a year, they might just be a vague memory. The social media post that sparked outrage, it'll be buried under an avalanche of newer scandals. Here's a practical tool to harness this perspective: the 5-year test. When negativity strikes, pause and ask, will this matter in 5 years? If the answer's no, treat it with the urgency of a spilled drink, wipe it up and move on. If the answer's yes, you've just identified something worthy of your focus. This filter separates the trivial from the transformative. Consider the Japanese concept of mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness of impermanence. Cherry blossoms are revered not despite their brief bloom, but because of it. Their fleeting beauty reminds us to savor the now. Stoicism takes this further. If even life's joys are temporary, why lend permanence to its irritations? That driver who cut you off, the snide remark from a relative, these aren't chapters in your biography, they're scribbles in the margin. Try this tonight. Grab a notebook and list 3 current frustrations. Next to each, write, will this outlive the season? Watch how quickly the list shrinks. The argument over dishes. Unlikely, the project setback, maybe, but even then, it's data for next time, not a life sentence. The real power lies in recognizing that most of what we agonize over expires faster than milk. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his meditations return again and again to life's brevity. Soon you'll be ashes or bones, he wrote, a mere name at best. That might sound grim, but it's oddly liberating. When you zoom out, you realize how little of the static deserves your bandwidth. The things that endure growth, relationships, the mark you leave aren't fueled by reactivity. They're built by those who know the difference between a storm and a sprinkle, and that's a perspective no one can take from you. Seneca once wrote that taking a walk was his instant remedy for anger, not a leisurely stroll, but a purposeful march to recalibrate his body and mind. He understood what modern science now confirms. Emotions aren't just felt in the mind, they reverberate through clenched jaws, tightened shoulders, and shallow breaths. The Stoics didn't separate philosophy from physiology. They knew that to master your reactions, you sometimes need to start with your posture. Consider the CEO who spends 5 minutes before high-stakes meetings practicing square breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. It's not just stress relief, it's a neurological reset. This technique, used by Navy SEAL and ancient philosophers alike, works because it hijacks the stress response. When your body feels threatened, your breath becomes erratic. By forcing rhythm back into it, you signal safety to your nervous system, the Stoic twist. Pair this with a mental mantra, this isn't an emergency, I choose my response. Suddenly, a physical act becomes philosophical training. For a more bracing approach, look to modern Stoics like Wim Hof, who use cold exposure to build resilience. Dunking your face in ice water might seem extreme, but the principle is pure Epictetus. Voluntary discomfort inoculates against involuntary chaos. When you willingly stand in a cold shower for 30 seconds, you're not just building tolerance to physical stress, you're rehearsing for life's emotional chill. The shiver of a coworker's snub or the freeze of public rejection becomes manageable because your body remembers, I've weathered worse. Here's your challenge. Tomorrow, borrow one of these practices. Maybe it's Seneca's walk, not scrolling on your phone, but striding with intention, noticing how anger loosens its grip with each step. Or try the 4-4-4-4 breath before a tense conversation, turning your body into an anchor for your mind. Even splashing cold water on your wrists can work like a reset button for frayed nerves. The key lies in consistency. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait for crises to practice Stoicism, he drilled it daily. Your body is the most immediate thing you control, far more than external events or other people's actions. So when negativity strikes, don't just think your way through it. Breathe, move, shock your system back to stillness, because sometimes the fastest way to steady your mind is to first steady your hands, and that's a power no one can take from you. Epictetus wasn't just teaching philosophy, he was offering a masterclass in linguistic discipline when he said, "First learn the meaning of what you say." Words aren't just sounds we make, they're the architecture of our reality. Every sentence we speak builds walls or bridges. Think of the last time someone snapped at you with, "You never listen." Now imagine if they'd said instead, "I feel unheard when conversations get interrupted." Same core issue, radically different impact. One phrasing escalates, the other invites. That's the Stoic secret. Language isn't just communication, it's calibration for dignity. consider the difference between "you ruined this project" and "I'd prefer more collaboration next time." The first is a verdict, the second an invitation. The Stoics knew that accusatory language hands over your power. It makes you a prisoner of someone else's actions. But when you reframe reactions as preferences, you reclaim agency. This isn't about sugarcoating, it's about strategic framing. A chef doesn't scream at a spoiled ingredient, they adjust the recipe. Your words can do the same with conflict. Let's put this into practice. Take a recent tense exchange, maybe a text thread that left you seething. Open it now and edit one message for neutrality. Replace "you're so inconsiderate" with "help me understand the delay." Swap "this is unfair" for "can we explore other options." Notice how the energy shifts. The facts haven't changed, but the battlefield has. You're no longer swinging at shadows, you're holding a lantern. History offers a striking example. When Gandhi faced British officers demanding he disband protests, he didn't shout, "You're oppressors," he said quietly, "I cannot comply with unjust laws." Those words didn't just refuse cooperation, they reframed the entire confrontation. The officers expected rage, they got principled clarity. That's the power of linguistic precision. It turns emotional reactions into ethical statements. Now try this role play. Imagine your coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting. The reactive script might be, "You stole my work," the Stoic edit. "I noticed my proposal was presented without attribution." Let's clarify roles moving forward. One makes you a victim, the other a problem solver. The magic lies in that tiny pivot from "you" to "I," from accusation to observation. Here's your challenge today. Carry a small notebook and jot down 3 phrases you habitually use when frustrated. Tonight, rewrite them as if you were a diplomat negotiating peace terms. That's not suppression, it's alchemy, because when you polish your speech, you're not just changing words, you're changing worlds, and that's a skill no one can take from you. Seneca began each morning with a peculiar ritual. He'd close his eyes and vividly imagine the worst day possible. A friend betraying him, a project failing, even his own death. This wasn't pessimism, it was mental armor. The Stoics called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. Picture a firefighter training in a smoke-filled room before ever facing a real blaze. By rehearsing adversity, they strip it of its power to paralyze. That's what Seneca was doing, not dwelling on fear, but dissolving it through preparation. Think of how pilots use flight simulators. They don't wait for an engine failure at 30,000 feet to decide how to react. They've drilled every possible malfunction until the correct response is muscle memory. Life's turbulence deserves the same readiness. Start small. On your commute, visualize a colleague dismissing your idea in a meeting. Hear their tone, feel the heat in your cheeks. Then mentally rehearse taking a breath and responding with curiosity rather than defensiveness. The goal isn't to manifest negativity, it's to ensure it never catches you off guard. Consider how firefighters conduct drills. They don't practice putting out random, abstract fires. They simulate specific scenarios: kitchen grease flames, electrical fires, stairwell rescues. Apply that precision to your emotional preparedness. Identify your top 3 recurring triggers. Maybe it's your partner's sarcasm during arguments, your boss's last-minute deadline changes, or internet trolls hijacking your joy. For each, script a Stoic response like a fire evacuation plan. If X says Y, I'll pause for 3 breaths, then ask Z. Here's the twist. This practice works because it exploits a neurological loophole. When you vividly imagine an event, your brain registers it similarly to an actual experience. That's why athletes visualize perfect routines before competitions. By mentally weathering criticism or setbacks in advance, you're not just preparing, you're inoculating. the real encounter becomes a second draft, not a first shock. Try this tonight. Pick one friction point from your week, a tense conversation, a recurring annoyance. Write it down as a what-if scenario, then detail two possible responses, your habitual reaction and your Stoic upgrade. For example, what if my neighbor complains again about my dog barking? My impulse is to argue. My Stoic response: I hear your concern, let's brainstorm solutions that work for both of us. The gap between those two options is where growth lies. Marcus Aurelius took this further, advising himself to begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. Notice he didn't say might, he said shall. Not because he expected the worst, but because he refused to let reality outpace his readiness. That's the genius of Premeditatio Malorum. It turns life's certain irritations into opportunities to practice virtue. So ask yourself now, what's one storm you can start carrying an umbrella for? Because preparation isn't fear, it's freedom. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who shaped Epictetus, offered a humbling insight. We can learn virtue not only from the wise but also from the foolish, if we observe their mistakes as warnings. There's profound power in that shift, from judging others to studying them. Every rude coworker, every internet troll, even that relative who thrives on drama, they're all unwitting tutors in the school of resilience. Think of it like this: when you witness someone erupt in anger over a delayed flight, you're not just watching a tantrum, you're seeing a live demonstration of what unchecked frustration looks like. Their outburst becomes your lesson plan. This is why Stoicism thrives in community. Ancient philosophers taught in bustling marketplaces, not isolated towers. They knew growth isn't a solo sport. Imagine trying to master a language without ever speaking to others. You might memorize grammar rules, but you'd miss the nuance, the rhythm, the living texture of conversation. Emotional resilience works the same way. Joining a Stoic reading group or online forum does something remarkable. It turns abstract principles into shared practice. When you hear how a stranger applied Marcus Aurelius' advice during a layoff, or how a parent used Epictetus to navigate toddler meltdowns, philosophy stops being ink on parchment and starts breathing in your daily life. Here's a tangible experiment. Find a challenge buddy, someone equally committed to responding with calm over chaos. Set a weekly check-in where you share one friction point and how you handled it. Maybe your partner resisted snapping at a condescending client, or your friend walked away from a social media argument. Celebrate those small victories like gym partners spotting each other's progress. There's neuroscience behind this. When we vocalize our intentions to others, our commitment deepens. It's why Alcoholics Anonymous uses sponsors' accountability, transforms ideals into action. Now look around your life. Who already models the calm you aspire to? Maybe it's the barrister who smiles through the morning rush, or the colleague who deflects office gossip with graceful redirects. Tell them you admire their composure not as flattery but as connection. You might discover an unexpected mentor, and if no one comes to mind, that's your invitation to become that person for someone else. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: wisdom isn't hoarded, it's circulated. Like a torch passed hand to hand, each of us carries a flame that grows brighter when shared. So ask yourself today, whose journey could intersect with yours, not to preach but to practice together. After all, the same wind that extinguishes a candle fans a wildfire. And when like-minded souls gather around these ancient truths, that's exactly what they become: unstoppable. Let's gather the tools Stoicism offers for weathering life's storms with calm dignity. First, the anchor. Focus on what you control, your effort, your attention, your interpretation. Everything else is just weather passing through. Next, perception, the lens that turns insults into lessons and setbacks into fuel. Then there's the pause, that sacred space between trigger and response where your power lives. And finally, empathy, the quiet understanding that most negativity isn't about you, but the unseen battles others carry. Remember, this isn't about becoming unshakable overnight. Even Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote reminders to himself daily. Dignity isn't the absence of struggle. It's the commitment to return to your principles again and again. As he put it, you have power over your mind, not outside events. That's the heart of it all. External chaos will always exist, but your inner citadel. That's yours to fortify. Now, don't let this just be another video you watch and forget. Pick one tactic to test in the next 24 hours. Maybe it's the 3-breath rule before responding to a snippy email. Or perhaps you'll reframe a frustration using the 5-year test. Growth happens in the doing, not the theorizing. If this resonated with you, pass it on. Share it with someone who could use more calm in their life, because the world could always use more dignity, one thoughtful response at a time. And as you step forward, here's my hope for you. May your next challenge reveal not what bothers you, but how far you've come. Until then, keep practicing. The obstacles aren't in your way, they are